Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're going to dive headfirst into what is honestly one of the most thrilling detective stories in human history. We're talking about the evolution of atomic theory. Now, think about this for a second. No one has ever actually seen an atom with their bare eyes. Literally impossible. Yet somehow we know exactly what they look like and how they behave. How? Well, scientists have spent centuries piecing together this invisible puzzle using some of the most ingenious, mind-blowing experiments ever conceived. And today, we're going to walk through exactly how they pulled it off. Here's a quick roadmap for our journey. We'll start with the philosophical birth of the atom, move on to Dalton's billiard ball model, explore how Thomson discovered the electron, unpack the famous gold foil experiment, and finally, wrap up with the discovery of isotopes and the neutron. Let's get right into it. Section 1. The birth of the atom. We are rewinding the clock way back to the 5th century BC in ancient Greece. This is where humanity's understanding of what makes up the universe really first kicked off. Now, what's absolutely wild about this early period is how one guy's opinion stalled scientific progress for 2,000 years. So two Greek thinkers, Leucippus and Democritus, had this brilliant idea. They imagined matter was like Lego bricks. If you took an object and just kept cutting it in half over and over, eventually you'd hit a solid, totally indivisible piece that you just couldn't cut anymore. They called this the atomos. But then Aristotle chimes in. He was much more famous, and he argued that matter was more like Play-Doh. He believed it was infinitely divisible and made of just 4 elements: fire, earth, air, and water. Because Aristotle was such a heavyweight influencer of his time, his Play-Doh theory won out, and humanity just kind of went along with it for over 2 millennia, despite absolutely no one doing any real experiments to prove either side. Section 2, Dalton's billiard ball model. Let's fast forward a casual 2,000 years to 1807. Enter John Dalton, an English school teacher who completely revolutionized chemistry by finally throwing some actual experimental science at these ancient concepts. Dalton revived the atomos idea, but he brought receipts. He hypothesized what we call the billiard ball view of the universe. He pictured atoms as these solid, microscopic, indestructible spheres bouncing around, acting as the fundamental building blocks of all chemical changes. His theory basically boiled down to a few key rules. First, matter is made of exceedingly tiny atoms. Second, if you have an element, every single atom of that element is absolutely identical in mass and chemical properties. Third, compounds are made when different atoms snap together in simple whole number ratios. And finally, you can't create or destroy atoms in a chemical reaction. You're just rearranging the billiard balls. But Dalton didn't just guess this. He used math to prove it, building on the brilliant work of French chemist Joseph Proust. Proust had already proven the law of definite proportions. That basically means any sample of a pure compound has the exact same recipe, the exact same ratio of elements by mass, every single time. Dalton took that ball and ran with it, adding his own law of multiple proportions. He showed that when elements combine to make different compounds, they do it in neat whole number ratios, no messy fractions. It was mathematically elegant. To really put this into perspective, let's look at a real-world example: isooctane, which is a major component of gasoline. Look at these 3 different samples. Whether you're testing sample A, B, or C, it literally does not matter. You will invariably find exactly 5.33 grams of carbon for every 1 gram of hydrogen. This incredibly strict consistency was the smoking gun. It proved that matter wasn't just some continuous mush like Aristotle thought. It was made of distinct, countable, Lego-like building blocks combining in highly specific atomic recipes. So Dalton's model was a massive game changer. It explained chemical reactions beautifully. But we quickly hit our first major scientific roadblock. If atoms are just solid, neutral little pool balls, where in the world do electrical charges come from? Think about it. Why do you get a static shock when you drag your socks across a carpet and touch a doorknob? If atoms are just indestructible, neutral blocks, electricity shouldn't exist. Section 3. Thomson and the electron. To solve this electrifying mystery, we step into the late 1800s with British physicist J.J. Thomson. He started playing around with electrical discharges inside sealed, low-pressure gas tubes. Thomson used something called a cathode ray tube. He pumped a high voltage through it and created this glowing visible beam. But here's the genius part. He brought electric and magnetic fields near the tube. And you know what happened? The beam actually bent. It was repelled by negative charges and attracted to positive ones. Because we know opposites attract. Thomson instantly realized this beam wasn't just light, it was a stream of negatively charged particles. What's crazier?
He did the math and figured out these particles were about 2,000 times lighter than a hydrogen atom, the lightest thing known to humanity at the time. Boom. Dalton was wrong about one thing. The atom wasn't an indestructible billiard ball. It had even smaller parts inside it. Thomson had just discovered the electron.
Okay, so electrons exist, but how much charge does one actually have? Enter American physicist Robert A. Millikan in 1909. This guy devised what might be one of the coolest experiments ever, the oil drop experiment. He basically built a tiny chamber, sprayed microscopic oil droplets into it, and zapped them with X-rays to give them a negative charge. As these charged droplets fell like microscopic rain, he turned on an electric field at the bottom of the chamber. By carefully tweaking the strength of that upward electrical push, he could actually fight gravity. He could slow the drops down, freeze them hovering in midair, or push them back up. He literally played God with gravity and electricity. By perfectly balancing that electric field against gravity, Millikan crunched the numbers and found something astonishing. The electrical charge on any hovering drop was always a precise multiple of one specific, incredibly tiny number. 1.6 times 10 to the negative 19th coulombs. Never a fraction of it. It's like discovering that money only ever comes in pennies. You can't hand someone half a penny. He had found the fundamental baseline charge of a single solitary electron. And because Thomson already found the mass-to-charge ratio, scientists could now finally calculate the actual mass of an electron. It is vanishingly small. But fixing one problem created another. Atoms, generally speaking, are electrically neutral. So if you have these tiny negative electrons zipping around inside, there has to be an equal amount of positive charge balancing them out. But where was it? J.J. Thomson suggested the plum pudding model. He thought the atom was basically a soft, mushy blob of positive charge with the negative electrons stuck inside it, kind of like raisins in a pudding or chocolate chips baked into a cookie. On the flip side, a Japanese physicist named Hantaro Nagaoka proposed a Saturn model. He thought there was a big positive sphere in the middle, surrounded by a flat ring of electrons, just like the rings of Saturn. Section 4. The gold foil experiment. We needed a way to physically peek inside the atom to see which model was right. And this brings us to an absolutely monumental experiment led by New Zealand physicist Ernest Rutherford. Rutherford, along with his colleagues Hans Geiger and Ernest Marsden, came up with a brutal test. They decided to fire a beam of extremely fast, heavy, positively charged alpha particles directly at a piece of gold foil. And this foil was incredibly thin. We're talking just a few atoms thick. The logic was simple. If Thomson's chocolate chip cookie model was correct, the positive charge in the atom was spread out, weak, and mushy. The heavy, high-speed alpha particles should just punch right through that soft gold foil, like bullets shooting through a cloud of smoke, maybe drifting slightly off course. But the results? They were absolutely mind-blowing. Sure, most of the particles went straight through, exactly as predicted. But a tiny fraction of them violently deflected off to the side, and a few actually bounced straight back at the source. Rutherford was completely floored. His reaction is legendary in the science world. He said it was as incredible as if you had fired a massive 15-inch naval artillery shell at a piece of tissue paper, and it bounced off and hit you in the face. That is how deeply everyone believed atoms were just soft, mushy clouds. Rutherford knew instantly that something dense and powerful was hiding inside that gold foil. In a single afternoon, the plum pudding model was completely shattered. Because almost all the alpha particles sailed right through the foil without hitting anything, Rutherford concluded that atoms are overwhelmingly, mind-bogglingly empty space. But because a handful of those positive particles smashed into something hard enough to violently bounce back, there had to be a tiny, incredibly dense, positively charged center doing the repelling. He called this the nucleus. To put the scale into perspective, if an atom were the size of a massive professional football stadium, the nucleus would be the size of a single glass marble sitting dead center on the 50-yard line. Everything else, just empty space and tiny electrons. Section 5, isotopes and the neutron. Okay, so we found the negative electron, and we found the positive protons chilling in the tiny nucleus. But there was still one final, glaring puzzle. The math wasn't mathing. The protons only accounted for about half the actual weight of the atom. Where was the rest of the mass coming from? Around this same time, an English chemist named Frederick Soddy was looking into radioactive materials, and he noticed something bizarre. He found that you could have atoms of the exact same element, acting chemically identical in every way, but they had completely different masses. He called these isotopes. Now, this was a huge problem because it directly broke Dalton's golden rule from 1807, the idea that every atom of an element must have the exact same weight.
If an element's identity is entirely defined by its protons, how on earth could two identical twins weigh different amounts?
Finding a particle with no electrical charge is notoriously difficult because you can't use magnets or electric fields to move it around. But finally, in 1932, a physicist named James Chadwick cracked the case. He found the missing piece of the puzzle: neutrons. These were neutral, completely uncharged subatomic particles packed right into the nucleus next to the protons, and they weighed almost exactly the same as a proton. Chadwick's brilliant discovery solved the missing mass problem overnight. It beautifully explains Saudi's isotopes. Think of it like a scale. Two atoms can be chemically identical twins, same number of protons, same number of electrons, but one is just heavier because it's carrying around a few extra, invisible, uncharged neutrons in its backpack. So let's take a breath and look back at this incredible timeline. See how science systematically peeled back the layers of reality? We started with ancient Greek philosophy, then Dalton gave us solid billiard balls in 1807. By 1897, Thomson ripped the electron out of that ball, proving atoms are divisible. In 1911, Rutherford blasted gold foil and discovered the dense hidden nucleus. And finally, in 1932, Chadwick found the elusive neutron. Together, they gave us the modern picture of the atom, a complex, heavy nucleus buzzing with protons and neutrons, surrounded by a massive, ghostly cloud of electrons.
And I really want to leave you with this mind-bending thought. Rutherford proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that the atom is almost entirely empty space. Just a tiny marble of a nucleus in a giant football stadium of nothingness. So, knowing everything we've just explored, how does this change the way you see the physical world? When you knock on a wooden desk, or hold your phone in your hand, or even high-five a friend, if you are fundamentally just empty space, what are you actually touching? Spoiler alert, you're just feeling the invisible repulsion of electron force fields. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. I hope this sparked your curiosity. And as always, keep questioning the universe